Insurmountable innovation. For a lot of people, mountains and mountaineering and surmounting things is a metaphor, but for a lot of innovators, it's their job. So about 60 years ago, Sir Edmund Hillary, Tenzing Norgay were the first people to summit Mount Everest. And this was a goal that had been attempted for decades. Many people had tried, many people had died in the attempt, but these two made it up. And as we all know, they are widely, they became extremely famous for that accomplishment. And the thing that enabled them to do this was actually kind of a controversial technology topic at the time. And there's a little red arrow pointing at that technology. Can anybody tell me what that technology is? Bottled oxygen, right. So a lot of people thought that wasn't really sporting. It's a little bit too much technology. If you're a real athlete, you'll just climb up the mountain yourself without air and stuff like that. So those are a lot of the people that didn't live to tell about how that worked out. So around this time, this phrase came up. Nobody knows who said this originally, but there are old climbers and there are bold climbers. But there are very few old, bold climbers. So what that means is basically there are a lot of people that take big risks, but they don't get a lot of chances generally. They'll take one or two of those big, bold risks, but they usually either die in the attempt or they get smart and they stay home and live off their sponsorship money for the rest of their lives. Some of them, though, decide to tone it down a little bit, play it safe, and do that thing over and over again, get better at it, scale up the process, basically. And that's actually what we see on Everest today. So this is a picture of Mount Everest today. This is a particular day, May 19th, 2012. 234 people in one day got to the summit of Mount Everest. 4 died, so it's still not without risk. That's, odds are okay, right? For Mount Everest. It costs a lot, but it's not the millions of dollars in today's dollars that Hillary and Tenzing Norgay would have spent. The point is, this has become really crowded. This is very typical in markets, right, as they scale up. So looking at the data about Everest, this is thank you National Geographic. Today we have about 1,000 climbers a year, every year, that go up to Everest. And as the number of climbers has increased from one every decade or two to 1,000 a year, the death rate has actually dropped precipitously. So today, you're talking about 1 or 2% death rate. So it's an incredible job of scaling up this really, really risky business. I know a lot of you are going, oh, I need to sign up right now to go on top of Mount Everest. It's no risk involved. But this idea of going from invention to scale up follows exactly that process, right? You've got a lot of risk in the beginning, but over time you de-risk it. Now this isn't just Everest, this is a lot of sports. Here's marathon. The beginning of marathon was 290 BC. Thucydides, I hope I'm pronouncing that right. If anybody's Greek in the audience, I'm very sorry, ran back from the Battle of Marathon all the way to Athens, 42 kilometers. If there's any marathoners in the room, they're going to tell me it's 42 point whatever it is, but we all know it's roughly 20 miles, 10 miles. It's a long way. And Chris, any idea? By the way, I get my beer right after this. I don't have to wait for the marathon. So everyone's all the way back, and everyone's like, oh my God, you're totally naked. Here, put something on. All right, and cover him up. And according to the legend, he just shouted out. Anybody read Greek? Ne nike kamen. Nobody's in a fraternity or sorority here? All right. Ne nike kamen. Nike, the victory. We are victorious. This is where Nike, the brand, gets its name, the goddess of victory. So we are victorious, collapses and dies right there. So apparently, this was so impressive that now, today, this is a huge sport. Okay, today, more than 500 marathons are held around the world every year. There are, just in the United States, there are 500,000 marathoners, just in the US. Okay, so we've scaled up quite a bit. And then if you look at the number of major, huge marathons, there are actually 5 or 10 marathons that have 30,000 participants that, this isn't even one of them, right? So there are huge marathons. This has become a huge sport. This thing where, the first guy died. What a good idea. Let's all do the same thing. Okay? So what are you doing for innovation today, right? We're going to get to that. This isn't only these two sports. Like this is the rule in sports. So you go from Jacques Cousteau to hundreds of scuba divers in every diveable spot in the world every single weekend, right? He's got a regulator that's the size of a personal pizza, and today you can buy this equipment, you can rent it very cheaply. The main organization that certifies amateur scuba divers is called PADI, which stands for the Professional Association of Diving Instructors. But it's known colloquially as pay and dive immediately, because it's that easy. All right, so skydiving. Now, skydiving was initially thought of as a way for observers in hot air balloons who were observing a battlefield or something like that to safely bail out of their contraptions when they inevitably failed, which they did all the time back then. So you jump out and fall to safety. Today, well, just earlier today, we were doing the Lux logo on the way down to this event. You see, this Lux team likes to do adventure sports together. Alcatraz, swimming from Alcatraz was something once only sharks did. Today, this is the Escape from Alcatraz triathlon. Thousands of people, again, on that one day jump in the water and swim across to the San Francisco shore. But again, this is something it's not trivial, it's hard, but it's something that anybody with enough determination and a little money can do. So this whole process, like I said, is a little bit like the invention to scale up process. And so not only does sports serve very well as a metaphor, but it actually serves very good as a test bed, if you will, for new business. So sports is a trillion-dollar industry. It's multi-trillion-dollar. Nobody really knows exactly because there's so many kind of weird ways to count what counts as sports. So there's professional athletes. There's advertising for them. There's sponsorships and things like that. There are obviously ticket sales. There are amateur athletes and all the equipment that they buy, especially if you're in triathlon. That's like three triathlon bikes right there. They're expensive. There's sports-related travel, so people go to see events. They travel to participate in events. There's a lot going on in what we would call virtual sports, so gambling on sports or doing fantasy leagues where you track the stats and you make your own team. This is a big business in the United States anyway, and derivatives of this exist all over the world. So even video games, one single video game franchise, the Madden NFL from Electronic Arts, that's a $4 billion a year product. So there's a lot of money in and around sports. And if we look at the pyramid here, you've basically got this. You've got the peak of the explorers and the professionals. You've got a wide band of amateurs that are spending various amounts of money to, on the one hand, just sort of keep in shape and get some exercise. And on the other hand, to really compete and are really serious about it. So that span, there's a lot of different people in that group. And then you've got the spectators, the people participating, again, in fantasy leagues, but they never get off the couch, or they watch it on TV, but they don't really participate in the sports actively. And all of us fit, in some degree or another, in some of those categories. So how many of you here do absolutely no sports whatsoever? OK, shame on you. How many of you? OK, one person. Tom. Well, Tom's about to retire, so he doesn't have to. He's going to play golf. How many are sort of weekend warriors? You get out and knock off a few miles and sort of get to the gym every once in a while. OK, all right, well, that's more than I expected. How many of you are pretty serious? You have one sport, whether it's golf or a marathon or something else that you're really committed to and you're really serious about. What are some of them? Please call them out. Put you on the spot. Golf. Tennis. Cycling, great. Do you do steroids? You're not really serious, OK. And somebody over here had their hand up too, or yes? Hockey. Wow, all right, that's hardcore. Good. Well, that's a lot of equipment. OK, so anyway, the point is that there's a lot of business, and there's no problem being a spectator. Spectators are good. We're all spectators in some sports. We can't be professionals or even elite athletes in more than one or two. So the point is, there's a lot of business in this. Sports is a good test bed. It's a good metaphor as well. So what I want to do in this is start at the top of that pyramid and just looking in sports, but a little bit beyond, who are some of the most bold new innovators that we see today in our work at Lux Research within sports and kind of on the edge of sports. Okay? So the first thing to know is that if you're going to go look for innovators, a good place to start is where there's an intersection of two existing fields. So you've got these two crowded fields, like, let's say, marathon and Everest. If you want to find the real innovators, these are people that are running marathons up mountains, hyper mile. No, seriously, there are people that will run up and down a mountain like in one day. So that's where you find the elite athletes. Or triathlon, is a sport that's been around for a couple decades now, but mix up swim, bike, and run, three sports that on their own are pretty dull and repetitive. All of a sudden, for some reason, for a few people, that becomes much more exciting. Climbing plus parachutes. Climbing has been done, parachuting has been done. Let's do them together. You get base jumping. Surfing and paragliding. You get kiteboarding. We have one kiteboarder in our company. Rihanna, where are you? she is in here. Anyway, you can ask her about kiteboarding. It's a lot of fun, and there's a whole group called Mai Tai Global where CEOs of startups go to just learn how to kite surf and drink and party like crazy because it's such an intense sport. That's the only way they can actually get excited about anything. So this metaphor, again, applies beyond sports. Looking at the different areas that we cover. So 3 big ones are materials, biology, and electronics. And as Dennis mentioned, we have a foresight practice, and one of the things that we do is look at ways that we can take a really big stretch goal and combine some different things, the same way these sports combine different things, and actually achieve that goal. So looking at these areas, what types of matchups can we get? Well, first let's take electronics and materials. So electronics, a big thing right now is the Internet of Things. So that's power technologies, display technologies, new processing technologies like Arduino and Raspberry Pi. These are just an emerging ecosystem of enablers for this Internet of Things that are all coming together. That ecosystem isn't fully formed, but if you talk about Internet of Things, people kind of get the idea that these are some of the components you mean. On smart textiles, another area where there's a lot of work going on, new technologies for temperature-sensitive textiles or electronic textiles or things like that. And I will say right now that I never trust a presenter who just comes up wearing a costume. Okay, so this isn't how I usually dress at work. This is actually a functional costume, and I'm going to start illustrating some of these principles if I don't electrocute myself here. So I've got a couple basic things, and we'll go through there. Can we see this blinking? Okay, I've got a little switch over here. And if this doesn't get too distracting and I don't start shorting out, I'll keep this on for a while. So electronic textiles are really getting very, very simple to do. Weaving in conductive threads, adding LEDs, sensors, all kinds of stuff like that. Can you even see this? Is it too bright? All right, good. So now, adding those two together, what do we get? Smart textiles plus Internet of Things. Well, one thing you get is the Adidas My Coach system. By the way, if you weren't clear, I'm a coach today. So the Adidas My Coach system basically takes an accelerometer and a heart rate monitor and puts it on every athlete on a team. All the data from those devices goes back as telemetry to the coach so they can see in every practice and in every game, how's the exertion of this player going? Who's really putting out too much effort and is going to injure themselves? Who needs to take a break? Who can I switch out? You have kind of like a fleet management system, not for your trucks and planes, but for your players. And just think about what fantasy league is going to do with this type of data, because it's not going to stay. The NSA is going to publish it for us. So what this will do to betting and so on. So this is not a cheap system. It's $100,000 a team. But still, they've gotten a lot of buy-in from Major League Soccer in the United States, from some of the European leagues. So over time, this quantified self comes to sports. It just makes a lot of sense. Now, fast forward a little bit. Think about like the ultimate system here. If we were going to do every single piece of sports and integrate it, what would that look like? You'd have equipment that amateurs wear. I mean, this stuff amateurs can buy it. It's just very expensive. It's getting cheaper. Pro performance, measuring that and copying the pros that you most admire. Gaming, this is a virtual baseball player if you can't tell. The spectator experience, what happens to all this? What happens to the building where all these things happen, the arena or the court? Imagine integrating all the data from all these things. It's not that hard to do. It's not even that you could start thinking about, okay, I know what I would do. Well, I'd look for that system here, and I'd use this Wi-Fi over here and Bluetooth there. And you can kind of see how this would come together, right? It's not crazy, given the technologies we already have. So to prototype this, I pulled together a crack team of developers. This is Elsa, who's 11, Laura, who's 13, and then there's Alex and me in the middle. This is my family, and we like to make things. And the wonderful uniform that you see here is a product of some of their innovative work. There's a lot more on the desk over here that we'll show. So this is basically what Team Ultimate Sports came up with. First of all, Kinect is a depth camera. This is not just a webcam, but it's a camera you attach to your video gaming system that doesn't just see the picture of what you're doing. It actually sees depth in 3D and can use that information, that 3D information, to do things like interpret gestures. It can recognize faces. It can count faces. It can measure your pulse by the changes in your skin color just as your heart beats. So you can't see this, but the Kinect can. It's an amazing piece of technology. And it's used for things like, so Nike Plus has a training program that you can buy for the Xbox, and you can work out with your favorite athlete and do things like that. I'm not going to do much more than that. But the point is, this technology is not very expensive. The Kinect is, you can get it for about $40 on Craigslist. And I'm going to demo it a little bit here. So, all right, do that in just a second. So the thing about the Kinect, and oh, here we go. So the thing about the Kinect, like I said, is that you can hack it now. I'm going to just kick out this one demo. How are we doing? All right, so this is the shapes demo. So you can see, there's me. Kicking stuff around. iPhone's broken. All right, so I'm probably losing points. Anyway, you get the idea. This is just the gesture recognition. Okay, I can do a lot of things. Oh, I could have done like that. Okay, so we've got one of these for every single player on the field. So we can see what they did, where they moved, how fast they were going, did they connect, what happened, and correlate that with the other data that we've caught. Okay, we can go dump the Kinect now, thanks. Now, like I said, the Kinect is really inexpensive these days. It's $40 on Craigslist. It's a pretty inexpensive device. But it was a closed device. And there's a company called Adafruit, which supplies a lot of the electronics that, sorry about that. Okay. So there's a company called Adafruit that supplies a lot of electronics. It's kind of like Radio Shack for hipsters, I guess. And they put a bounty on the Kinect. So they said, if you can crack open the Kinect and make it hackable, we'll give you a bounty. Any ideas? The number's up here, but $2,000 was the bounty. Okay, so not a huge bounty. Microsoft immediately said, we will sue you if you do that. And they said $3,000. So another $1,000. It's worth getting sued by Microsoft for $1,000. The point is, that's actually what happened. So there's a whole open source movement. There's all kinds of software that you can get that you can hack yourself. And you can do all kinds of things with the Kinect that Microsoft never really intended you to do. So that's the basis of a part of our system. And again, to put a value on what we see happening in depth sensors, PrimeSense was a company just bought by Apple in the last couple weeks for $345 million. Now, again, do the math a little bit. That's about roughly how many Kinects if we were going to buy them on Craigslist? That's a lot of Kinects, right? $40 each, $340. They're paying a lot for this technology. And there are also lots of little Kickstarter projects. So depth cameras are becoming as ubiquitous, soon they will be, as the CCDs that you've got on your phones and every other device in your house. Okay, so Kinects are interesting. And we just did the demo, thank you. Another one is the Pebble Watch. So now I talked about the Pebble Watch last year. Anybody not know what the Pebble Watch is? I'll just tell you what it is. Okay, so the Pebble Watch is a watch that was the inventor, this guy Eric, this 27-year-old Canadian engineer, wanted to develop some hardware and tried to go get some venture capitalists to pay for that. And he totally failed in raising any money from venture capitalists. He got a couple $100,000, not nearly enough to do what he wanted to do. So instead he went to Kickstarter, put it on Kickstarter, and at the time it was the biggest Kickstarter project success ever. He raised $10 million on a $100,000 goal, and in fact had, then he had a huge problem that how am I going to make all these things in my garage? He had to completely change his business plan. Now you can buy these at Best Buy. They outsold the Samsung Gear last year, which is Samsung's attempt at doing a smartwatch. So it's a really amazing story, but then it's also an amazing platform. So like I said, we've got the monumental goal. He was one of these bold achievers, but he also now has a platform. So the Pebble just released the software developer kit, the SDK, for the accelerometer in this device. And there are all kinds of apps that people are just now developing that can sense your movement like this in 3 dimensions. So last night I tried out a sleep monitor. It told me I didn't sleep enough, so I'm going to delete it from my app thing. But but there are a lot of the things that we now get from like a Fitbit or from Nike Fuel Band or all these other places that are proprietary closed systems that now you have on an open platform. The biggest thing that Pebble got out of their Kickstarter project was obviously a lot of buyers, but it was a lot of developers. They have thousands of developers making apps for the watch. Okay? And the next thing they're going after is smart homes. It has nothing to do with sports. Like I said, it's on the edge. Now it's going to smart homes. So this is the things that they're coming up with next. Control your home from anywhere in the world with iControl Pebble. Arm your alarm, change the climate, even toggle your lights on and off. Okay, coming soon. So open platforms, that's the key to scaling up, not closing things off. Another example is this. Now, this is Life shoes. I'm going to show you some of these. I actually have a few. So Life shoes has a pretty cool story. They're heavy. No, I'm just kidding. The story of Life shoes is this. So Ali Khalifa, who's an inventor and entrepreneur, and is here in the audience. Ali, are you? There's Ali. So this is the man. Wanted to make some shoes that were made of renewable materials, but also could be recovered in the manufacturing process. So starting out from all the individual components being sourced from renewables, developing a manufacturing process that works at small scale, so these can basically come back to the factory, be disassembled, and reused or put into some other value-creating process. Also, they're custom, so you can design them to your specifications. If you don't like this pattern, which I don't know why you wouldn't, you can put your own there. So we're putting our team colors. This is going to be our team shoe. The really cool thing is that they left room in here, right in here, we can put in an Arduino. You can put in a microcontroller. And I love what Ali said. It's not on here, but what he said on the site when he announced this. I don't know what you're going to do with this, but you'll figure something good out. Okay. So hacker fun. But I think the most impressive thing about the shoes, by the way, the reason I'm not wearing them is because you wouldn't want to touch them afterwards if I was wearing them, so you can come touch these afterwards, is the story of what happened in the process. So this is also a Kickstarter project. And this is a lot to read, so I'm just going to read the highlights. But this is what Ali wrote to all the backers when the Kickstarter project didn't reach its goal. Okay? Every size in our current situation has to be mass-produced, which means every size has a fairly significant cost to get started. You have to have a mold, basically, for left and right, in each size. Men's 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11. Women's every half size. So there's a lot of molds, tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of dollars of upfront cost before you can sell even one shoe. That was the first problem. So in the process of going through this, they found a way to completely engineer every single pair of shoes custom. Basically 3D print that thing that they would have had to do a mold for at the same cost that they can do basically for the molded shoe. So that means not only could they launch with every single size available, men's and women's. They were only going to do a narrow range of men's whole sizes. You launch with every size available. They can print any size you want. Men's, women's, kids, different size, left foot, right foot. So this is a lot better than anything Adidas offers today. Okay, so it's a pretty powerful discovery. And this is a great example of failing and then recovering really well. So check these out. This is, by the way, the table full of goodies. You can all come up afterwards. The next thing to integrate all these things together, like I said, this is literally an 11-year-old and a 13-year-old's work. There's Scotch tape. I'm hoping I'm not going to electrocute myself. The depth camera, the textile Arduinos, the blinking lights, that is, the Life smart shoes, the Pebble smartwatch. All these things come together to form a pretty interesting system. You can also look at the things that we cover in our advanced materials, printed flexible organic electronics, energy electronics, and bioelectronics services to see more technologies like this. But you pull all this together, and you've got a great system. Machine vision from the Xbox Kinect, smart textiles, accelerometer from the Pebble smartwatch, your custom fit shoes, basically adds up to about $400 a player, about $5,000 a team, compared to $100,000 for a less featured system from a major manufacturer. Now, we've got a few kinks to work out. It's not quite done yet. Stuff that didn't work is all over there on the table. But the point is, this is bringing not just a new product idea, but a new platform to market. Okay, when these things start coming together, regular materials have more and more intelligence. You can think of, from Internet of Things, the next paradigm is computing composites. We make composites from a resin and a filler and lots of different materials because it gives you the properties of both. So when you've got electronics, computational power, sensors, and things like that fit right into materials, whether they're 3D printed or woven in or integrated in some other way, you essentially have a new property or a new function of your materials. And that's really important to pay attention to. So computing composites. Another one, biomaterials and regular materials. So a very hot area recently has been biomimetic design. So we see a lot of high-performance prosthetics. So you've seen a lot of racers in the Olympics and the Paralympic Games. These racers are so fast that they're actually beating naturally abled runners. to the point where that's starting to be banned. If you have prosthetics, you're going to have to race in a different league because you'd be too fast to race with the guys that still have their legs. And this is true. And there are a lot of other materials too, like surfaces. So the Dunlop Gecko Tack, which is a biomimetic surface mimicking gecko fingers that hopefully allows you to hold your tennis racket a little bit better. The Speedo laser swimsuit, which broke so many records when it was used in the Olympics that they banned it from the Olympics, can't use it anymore. So biomimetic design is a huge area. Bio-based materials is another one, again, one that we have a lot of coverage of. And two of the areas we've been looking at that in that field are synthetic biology and nutrigenomics, functional foods. Now, those areas seem kind of separate, but Autodesk, which is one of the largest, if not the largest, provider of computer-aided design and engineering tools, actually has a software project now that they call Project Cyborg. I think they should change the name just for public relations, but the idea is basically they want to go from molecular modeling to metabolic pathways to whole organisms and be able to model that out and help people create new organisms from the first principles, if you will, of biochemistry. Now, where this is all going is we've got bio-based products to biofunctional products. And by that, I mean not just products that have biomaterial in them that give them the properties of those biological organisms, but the functions, the things that those organisms do. So let me give you a couple examples. One is Soylent. Anybody heard of Soylent, not the movie? Okay. All right, so Soylent is a nutritionally complete meal replacement. It was created by a computer hacker. And it's, well, you can see over there, it's not the most appetizing color. But the idea that this inventor had is basically to take that and make it as a platform, an operating system that everybody could hack, share recipes. So if you want, okay, I've got a big game tomorrow, or a big test, or I need to get to sleep, or whatever you want, you can create a recipe. When you've tinkered with it enough to really get that down, you can publish that so the whole community can use it. So he didn't just create a product, he created a platform. This project raised $7 million, okay? And I've talked with many people in the food and beverage industry, and they were like, how the hell did that happen? That's crazy. $7 million for what is basically, I don't even know what those drinks are called, but Nutriless or something like that. So the point is, this is just a bold new way to make a platform, and I think that's the key difference. Another one is Glowing Plant. So Glowing Plant, yet another Kickstarter project, and you'll hear a lot of those. So Glowing Plant was started by this guy, Anthony Evans. They had a $65,000 goal, and they ended up raising $484,000 to basically take fluorescent genes from one organism, transport them into another organism, a plant called Arabidopsis. It's a very common lab plant, and make a plant that glows. Now, this has been tried in the past. It's just been never been done commercially. The reaction was pretty strong. Anybody have an idea about what the reaction might have been? Why the hell are you using GMOs and selling them on Kickstarter? A lot of people have really strong feelings about this. So this movement started to stop the Glowing Plant project. And that, I think, is one of the things that drove the revenue up so much. It was a little bit like when President Bush tried to ban stem cells in California, said, oh, we have billions of dollars for that, thank you. Sometimes it is having that opposition. It's that initial apparent failure that actually brings people to your side. And that's what happened with Glowing Plant. So not only did they blow past their goal, they blew past one of their stretch goals, which I think is really exciting. This is from Anthony. What we really want to do is extend this to bigger plants, which brings us to our first stretch goal. If we raise $400,000, we'll take the work we do on Arabidopsis and apply it to creating a glowing rose. So imagine a rose that glows blue or red or yellow or, I don't know, maybe your team colors. Pretty amazing new technology that, again, is really getting accessible. And Anthony was going to come and bring some of these so you could actually see them. Didn't work out logistically, but he did send us a discount offer. So if you go to glowingplant.com/seeds and enter this code, LuxSummit, you'll get a 20% discount. And if you're a client of Lux Foresight Services, I'll buy you one myself. So another company, Modern Meadow. So Modern Meadow, some of you have already seen today. Modern Meadow, the basic idea, if you weren't in Andrus's presentation earlier in the panel, is this. Meat is a very environmentally intensive process. We use a lot of water, land, and so on. There are animal cruelty issues. A lot of animals are not well taken care of. There are health issues. There's a lot of reasons that meat isn't the best thing in the world for us to be stuffing in our mouths. So their idea is to basically use 3D printing, stem cells, and tissue engineering to create artificial meat. Some people actually got to try some chips today, right? Where's Andrus? So there's Andros. So Andros, you can stand up. So Andros, I don't know if you have any chips left, but they're like $10 a piece, I think, at this point. They're pretty expensive, right? But there are obvious issues around food, right? Regulatory, consumer acceptance, a lot of other factors. So it's a really long road to commercializing this. I don't know when Andros figured this out, but at some point they said, hey, before we do food, let's do something that we can do more easy, which is leather. So this is Andros's, this is another presentation that Andros is at. And you can see what Modern Meadow is gunning for. Food, leather goods, agricultural biotech, advanced materials and textiles. There's a lot of things that they can do with this approach to leather. So Andros has some samples that, if you're really nice, he might let you see or touch, of leather that they can do different things with, like make it translucent, change how smooth it is or how rough it is, how thick it is. So all the things that we sort of have to accept from the animals that we get leather from, we can now engineer without killing them in the first place. So it's a really amazing technology, and I think where it goes is really today just limited by technology, but in the future it's got a lot of different directions. So, by the way, if it wasn't already obvious, this is the beginning of the networking section. It's not the end of the day. I'm telling you who to talk to. So, how about electronics plus biology? So this sounds like kind of a weird combination, right? A little creepy. So in biology, we've got the quantified self movement, things like wearable sensors, sleep monitoring and exercise monitoring, like I just talked about, behavioral and medical data, the 23andMe, personal genomic stuff. Okay? On the electronic side, we've got machine intelligence. I just showed you some machine vision. We'll start to combine that with things like make that ubiquitous. GoPro. By the way, your Pebble can control your GoPro, so it's good for that too. The gesture interfaces. So basically, these machines are starting to understand the context of what they're seeing, which is a big step away from where it's been in the past. Now, add that to natural language processing, like Watson, IBM's big project. So we're actually collaborating with IBM to see how we might use Watson to do searches and queries in our own natural language database about companies and technologies and markets to help you find answers better. So where might this all go? Well, one area is NeuroSky. So NeuroSky is a company that we cover, and they've developed a headset. They've developed a chip that's basically an electroencephalogram, which reads your brain waves. This is one example. This, again, is actually from a game. So 2 of these cost $50. And I have an Arduino here. If you want to, it's a little bit too complicated to demo on stage. If you want to show basically how see how your brain waves look, you can do this hack that together with a soldering iron and a few wires and see that stuff. So what does that tell you? Well, it tells you things like how much are you concentrating? What's your degree of focus in a particular time? So combine that with some of the other telemetry you might get from the other sensors that we saw earlier, and you can see how a coach, for example, might be able to give not just physical advice, but mental advice too. So that's reading brains. What did I do with the clicker? So the opposite of that, obviously, is writing. So there's a company called Backyard Brains. They make a lot of science kits, and this is one of them called the Roboroach. Anybody heard of the Roboroach or seen the Roboroach? The Roboroach, and you can come and see this. There's no roach, by the way, which we were going to have. But the Roboroach is basically an electronic circuit board that you can attach to the back of a roach. You attach its antenna into some electrodes on this, and you can drive it with your smartphone. I really was going to do this. They just didn't show up in time. So, so the Roboroach, like I said, this is it's a Kickstarter kind of project. It's a really basic little thing. This isn't from the deepest bowels of DARPA. It's something that you can buy and you can show your kids how to do. It's an educational kit. So it is, I promise. They have a lot of other stuff too. They actually have one machine that reads your muscle, the electrical signals in your muscles, and another one that stimulates those muscles. So they have a demo where one person's wearing one and the other's wearing the other, and the person is controlling the other person's arm. It's pretty funny. So anyway, so bringing this all together, again, this is all really easy stuff, right? This is not the most advanced technology in the world. You've got this machine vision, smart textiles, accelerometer. You've got a really good view of your individual players. You've got personally optimized training, maybe a glowing salad, I don't know what you do with glowing plant. You've got your leather shoe and ball from Modern Meadow, mental performance and monitoring and intervention from NeuroSky. You've got a really complete vision of this thing that we talked out in the beginning where, from planet to player, it's all integrated. The parts are all there, and integrating them is getting easier and easier. And like I said, the very point was that this was something that some teenagers did. So what could you do if you look at these intersections? So, biofunctional materials, computing composites, Internet of Living Things. These are all opportunities, obviously, directly in sports, as I've just demonstrated, but there's a lot of stuff outside of that as well. So how do we scale that up? All right, I'm going to do a little score today. As you can see, I'm dressed as a coach. I am a coach. Here's our score of season last year. So the incumbents, well, you have the Adidas My Coach. We have the Autodesk Product Cyborg. Cool products. Good wins. We have the startups that did the machine vision, the e-textiles, the smartwatch, the smart shoes, the translucent leather, the glowing plant, the brain interface, input and output. Okay? So how are we feeling, team? Terrible! You should be feeling terrible. This is rotten. This is the worst season I've ever seen. Okay? We would all change all of you out. Our draft picks, we'd be spending millions of dollars to get new players if this is what our season looked like. This is way, way, way suboptimal, right? You can do way better. So why did this happen? Okay, compare the incumbents and the startups. Incumbents are playing not to lose. Find out when the technology will be ready. Let's scout the space to see when we need to step in, right? Pretty typical thing. Innovators say, well, everything we have to start, we need to start it, is right here, right now. If we have to make a cardboard prototype, we'll do it. They get started right away. Failure is not an option for big companies. If you're in a big company and you fail, well, we need to optimize the plan before we're ready to launch. For all these startups, remember all the failures that they went through that I told you about. They knew that was going to happen. And they knew they could only figure out what they needed to do by failing first. Think about these failures. So if you were in Ali's shoes and your Kickstarter project went the way his went, if you were in, say, Anthony's shoes and the GMO, no, don't do that, what would have happened to your project? It would have been canceled, right? Oh, well, OK, that was a bad idea. Let's go do something else, right? That's not an option if you're a startup. So patents, well, a lot of companies we talk about the long road to commercialization. The patents are going to run out before we get to market. Startups have exactly the opposite mentality. This is going to get commercialized so fast, it'll be obsolete before the patents even get filed. So we're not even going to bother to file patents, because we're going to be on to the next thing. Okay? And time. Time is on our side. The core business, they look at the long or short term. Our job is tech scouts, innovation. We look at the long term, right? No urgency. For startups, as soon as we run out of money, we're dead. That's the number one rule of a startup. It's they're not worried. Pebble's not worried about Samsung or Apple watches. They're worried about running out of money, and that's probably not going to be a problem right now anyway. Okay? So the problem is this. One team is playing Frisbee, and the other team is fighting for its life. Okay? So we're playing Frisbee here. Not good. This is the only thing you need to know about winning. If you are in the rearview mirror, then you're losing. If you're looking at the rearview mirror and seeing everybody else, you're winning. That's it. It's really simple. Okay? How do we get to make this part of the practice of big companies? Well, okay, first of all, I think this difference between exercise and Frisbee versus competition is really core. So innovation is not just about survival, or sorry, about staying healthy. We all know that in the long run, the way even big companies get disrupted and go out of business is that they don't compete. Okay? This is a fight for survival. Now, some truths about exercise versus competition. Exercise is very boring. Okay? Winning, that's awesome. Nutrition, if you're eating food for nutrition, it tastes terrible. But if you're winning, it tastes awesome. No trophies for fitness. Nobody gives you a trophy for going to the gym. You only get a trophy if you win a game, which means defeating somebody else. You have to have losers to have winners. Okay, and I know there's a lot of touchy-feely stuff. Oh, we can all win. No. We have to play to defeat other people. They have to feel bad when we're done defeating them. Okay? So we have to change the way we do this to survive. Winning is survival. Okay? We need to apply the best aspects of sports, not just exercise, but sports, to innovation. So what can we do? We want to be the P90X, and the Spartan race of innovation. We need to do these three things. First of all, we need to have competitions, not just processes. Okay? We need to do physical drills, not just mental modeling of stuff. Okay? And we need to do structured training. You can't expect to just walk on as a natural talent in this field and do anything. So what does that look like? Well, first of all, envisioning victory, not just efficiency or being better and being kind of in the front line. Winning means looking at big goals. So if startups can achieve the little things like you've talked about today, a couple tens and hundreds of millions of dollars. You have no business competing with them. That's one of the reasons I think Samsung looked not so good compared to the Pebble smartwatch. Is because they're a multi-trillion-dollar whatever company. They're huge. They shouldn't be competing with 27-year-olds that got funding on Kickstarter. Okay, so here are some trillion-dollar opportunities that we've identified. We look in our own research as well as externally. So the Internet of Things is potentially $5 to $15 trillion in the near future. Nano-enabled products, our advanced materials team has seen $4.4 trillion worth of opportunity just in the next 4 years. Slowing aging instead of treating diseases, our medical research looking at that, $7.1 trillion. Partnering to unlock the $1 trillion opportunity in energy efficiency retrofits. It's in the title. It's not that hard to find. There's a lot going on out there that are these big goals, and this is the arena which you big companies should be competing. Physical skills are also really important. So I purposely brought up a whole bunch of Kickstarter projects and hacked together things and just really amateur technologies that you might think are sort of beneath you. If you roll back the clock 10 or 15 years, I bet you would have said the same thing about venture-backed startups. So how many of you still do government research, rely on corporate labs and vertical integration to get innovation done? Anybody? That's it? OK, good. Everybody's moved on. So university research, venture capital, startup incubators, corporate partner networks. And the rest of you aren't doing anything? Or OK. All right. How about hack technology, crowdfunding? Any of you have ever, so startups, you can't do this. But corporations, how many of you have ever done a crowdfunding project? Or a technology? None. Oh, no, you're just scratching your eye. OK. How many of you have ever been to a makerspace, like a tech shop or something like that? OK. All right, more. That's good. What did you think? Impressive, boring? Yes, a bunch of kids with tools, soldering irons. OK. So this is just like the venture business, where you put in a little money in a lot of companies and hope that a few of them survive. This is this on steroids. Okay? There's a lot of stuff out there that is really just people's hobbies. But as you can see, all the examples I've shown you, there are some extremely impressive and important technologies coming out of this new game of the maker movement and everything associated with it. So you need to get involved in that. So how do you do that? Well, one way is to start innovation competitions. So competitions are a big and rising thing. XPRIZE actually put some stuff into space that way. NASA does a lot of these competitions. HackMeet was a way of looking at food innovation. This is a San Francisco hackathon. And the iGEM competition, that stands for International Genetically Engineered Machines. This is kind of like the first robotics competition of genetic engineering and synthetic biology. So we actually have Kim Demora. So Kim, the fellow at the iGEM organization. Every year, how many teams this year are competing?
Registration closed yesterday with 229.
229 student teams from around the world developing all kinds of things, biosensors, remediation technologies, new materials, even biological logic circuits and things like that. This is an amazing set of projects, and there's a history. How many years have you been doing it now? 10th anniversary this year. So we've tracked these and categorized these just to look at all the different types of projects that these student teams are looking at. They're probably not ready to plug into your product next quarter. But by looking at these types of competitions, you get a good idea of what's possible, who's doing it. It's a hiring, good place to look for hires. And I think eventually this is a good place to look for actually investing some money. Another area is incubators, corporate and non-corporate incubators. So, for example, the Pebble watch came out of Y Combinator. It's a very successful incubator. They've had something like 172 companies come out. All those are collectively worth almost $8 billion. So, those amateurs are actually doing some good work. But you've also got corporate labs like Nike has Fuel Labs, Electronics has Lab IX or Lab 9, not sure how they call it. Deutsche Telekom has Hubraum. So this is something that a lot of corporations are getting into as a way to not only interact with innovators, but get their own employees to be more outwardly focused and start to interact with these things physically. Another example is hackathon. So hackathon has a little bit of a connotation in a lot of circles of, oh, we're breaking into things. And that's true, but they usually are things that you own, like a Nike Kinect, or sorry, a Microsoft Kinect, or all those Northwestern companies. Or your car. Now, hacking into your car was something that was a quick way to void your warranty, and a lot of people were hesitant to do. And car makers really didn't want you getting in under the hood either. But Ford finally, after decades of losing at telematics, said, hey, why don't we bring in these people that are doing this anyway? So they've started a program doing hackathons, the OpenXC hackathon. They have a partnership with Tech Shop where they give their employees memberships at Tech Shop. And the first year after giving them that membership, they had a 50% increase in the number of patentable inventions. So direct results from a really, really little investment. So that's another thing you can do. And there's this. How many of you knew every single person in your corporation and what's going on? Right. Open innovation, external scouting can be internal. You can actually look inside and find a lot of really amazing stuff going on. The whole premise of the book, The Innovator's Dilemma, is that people get frustrated internally because nobody listens to their great ideas. So Adobe didn't want to have that problem. So they created a program they call Kickbox where you get a red box. And as you see it here, it says, everything necessary to begin innovating in one box, which actually sounds kind of uninnovative, right? But what is in there is actually a little bit of a trick. So there is a process. There's a 6-step process that they developed. It's pretty loose, though. It's inception, come up with the idea, ideate, improve, investigate, iterate, and infiltrate, which means infiltrate in the organization and make that a new product. There was also a prepaid credit card for $1,000. They didn't track it. They're like, whatever you think is important to spend it on, we trust you. And there's also 40 hours or so to be spent over 6 to 8 weeks to actually come up with this idea and get it through this 6-step process. Now, I know a lot of materials and electronics companies where $1,000 wouldn't buy you even reagents or 40 hours wouldn't get you one experiment. So there are ways you'd need to scale this up to apply to your organization. But the point was, this was a huge motivator for the employees that participated. The ones that got to the top, the blue box people, that means they got to actually launch a product. So from roughly 1,000 people or so, the ones that got to the top, 21 blue boxes. There's 21 new products and features that Adobe could start launching. Absolutely some of the best money they ever spent. So taking these exercises, if you will, and putting them into a program might look something like this. External and internal, slow and fast. Have an arrangement like this and measure. Set up time to do them. Measure that you do them. None of these are bad ideas inherently. It's not like, well, incubators aren't really for us. If you do them right, yeah, they are. As you can see, there's a really broad range of industries that they apply to. So making them work is actually part of the process of innovating. So in the next year, I hope that you will try at least one of each of these things. Have a specific formal program to do it. See what happens. If you're not failing, you're not trying hard enough, you're not trying enough new stuff, and then revise it. Okay? This should be part of your corporate innovation exercise program for victory. So any athlete today can have more data about their latest bike ride than most of you probably have about your innovation process. The quantified self movement hasn't really hit corporate America yet. There are tools out there. They're not great. We've got business intelligence, which is really more like fitness trackers for the core business. We've got some innovation management, which are tools for goals. They generally address a piece of the puzzle, but nothing has really come together to bring this all together. So this is where I see some opportunity to do what we did with this ultimate sports thing. Bring a bunch of technologies together and create a really solid system. What we intend to provide to that goal is, one, new strategic visions, ideas like the computing composites and the Internet of Living Things, tools like the ones I just described for you. So we'll look at these processes and find best practices and some case studies that can really help you figure out what's best for your business. And then I think personal habits are really important. I mean, I'm standing up here in front of my boss, my boss's boss, all my colleagues and clients and new people and strangers wearing, blinky lights, rainbow blinky lights. That's pretty gutsy. So I think just doing some of this stuff that might seem kind of silly, and granted, this is actually silly, but it might help you make something amazing. So like I said, this is not amazing for me, but I know for my kids, they learned a lot in doing it. And that's the point. That's why I did this, not so I could show off to you, because I want my kids to know that, hey, something I built just got shown to 400 people. Okay? Yeah, it makes them care. So anyway, that's how we get this bold and old going. So I want to just wrap up with a couple quotes. So back to Everest. There's a little asterisk around Sir Edmund Hillary and Tenzing Norgay as to the first summit of Everest. It's the first known summit of Everest. There was another explorer a long time earlier, 1924, so 30 years earlier, whose body was found in 1999. Nobody knows if he actually made it to the summit or not. But he was a real pioneer. He was one of the people who said gases, tubes are for sissies. He said this, basically, when people asked him, why do you want to do this? What's the use of climbing Mount Everest? My answer must be at once, it is of no use. There's not the slightest prospect of any gain whatsoever. We shall not bring back a single bit of gold or silver, no gems, no coal, no iron. But There's something in man, in humans, that responds to the challenge of this mountain and goes out to meet it. The struggle is the struggle of life itself, upward and forever upward. And he is also the person who said, well, why do you want to climb Mount Everest? Just because it's there. Okay? This, I think, is really inspiring. It's also a good way to have your innovation endeavors turn into be nothing, right? Be dead on the mountain for 50 years. This, I think, is the real lesson. So why do you do it? So you can come back and say, we were victorious. Okay, winning is the goal, and you should always keep that in mind. I think there's a little bit too much, hey, let's have fun, let's be innovative. Partnering, it's all kind of warm, touchy, feely stuff. No, this is really serious battle, and we've got to change the way we think about innovation so we can actually start seeing some of the results. And that means that there are going to be winners and there are going to be losers. You can decide which category you want to be in. Thank you very much for your attention, and I would love to take any questions or show you some cool toys.